Sadly, I've always had enemies. As a dude who conversates through the medium of a basketball,
nobody in this tundra can guard me.
A lot of my childhood rivals were like the stars of separate teams. But one of these enemies was actually someone who I never knew.
Zion, as everyone calls him, college basketball sensation, whose life is really about to change in an instant. He's projected to be the first pick in tomorrow's NBA draft.
Imagine someone doing this,
everybody's waiting for Zion Williamson,
seeing that they're ranked #1, being scheduled to face them next week, and you got a midterm Tuesday. I mean, comparably to these people in my age group, I just wasn't that guy.
It's not fair. It's been over since he put his name in the contest.
Sure, I wasn't really a 7-foot demigod sent from Mount Olympus to drop 59 a game, but I did average a cool like 15. Not really Troy Bolton, more like Corbin Blue.
You ever think LeBron James or Shaquille O'Neal auditioned for their school musical?
And kinda just like High School Musical. Our basketball team formed a sort of rigid space of relational acquaintance, which told a story in our young lives, incentivized by the prospect of being closer to the girls' volleyball team.
Sharpay's kinda cute too.
Everything I saw in a Zion Williamson or a Troy Bolton, I wanted to embody, but I wasn't even the best in the city. Hell, I was always like the second or third option on a team. You could almost say immediately this innate relational acquaintance taught me, for every Troy Bolton, there's a Corbin Blue, or a guy that just like cooks, and that we just never see in the game. He just like
Hey,
cooks.
Sharpay.
Zeke! Cookies? Oh, he's got no cookies.
Term!
It's breaking news! It's breaking news! It's breaking
Why are you pausing me? What shark video am I in this time?
Jake Paul is fighting Mike Tyson!
Wait, Mike Tyson?
I was gonna rip his heart out. I'm the best.
Like Mike bite your ear off and spit it into the crowd, Tyson?
Everyone wants to know what's going through your mind.
You can't touch me. You're not man enough. I eat your
Like Mike knock you out in 5 seconds, Tyson?
Is the old Mike back? Is vintage Mike back?
I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been.
He's fighting?
That we felt in our bones. That's what everyone who grew up watching you remembers.
He's fighting?
Mike Tyson.
He's fighting?
That trembling bone.
Yeah, he's fighting.
No, someone's getting put to sleep. It's going to be a war, and we're both heavy hitters. It's not going the full 16 minutes.
You know, there's one thing about a camera. It has more intent than we give it credit for. Headlines read, on November 15, 2024, in what was undoubtedly the most watched combat sports event of all time, streaming numbers that are estimated to be roughly half of the Super Bowl, Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson failed to deliver much of a fight. My synopsis of this fight: in the most bland, tasteless, uncomfortable battle of all time, Jake Paul successfully beat a senior citizen. See, boxing, unlike any other sport, has a ticking time clock for peak performance. And also, considering the age gap between these two,
largest age disparity in a legally sanctioned boxing bout.
We should have known the fight wasn't serious. I'm not saying Unk can't punch when he wants to. Going back and watching clips of him warming up before the match was actually kind of terrifying. And it seems like most of the internet believed me too.
Different day, same fate. I'm not gonna take you home.
Throughout Mike Tyson's bout against Jake Paul, however, Mike didn't have the same knockout promise he advertised. And it didn't make it any better that Jake Paul kind of just like walk around him and like tepidly struck. Emphasis on the tepidly, definition for tepidly on the screen, please. He didn't really do anything innovative. I mean, this performance was certainly not the knockout that Jake Paul had promised, or that our fathomizations of a past Mike Tyson would have us want to materialize in 2025, because Jake Paul is an asshole and I do want to see him get punched at the end of the day, you know what I mean? The fact of the matter is, in Jake Paul's brother's own words,
Jake Paul is a promoter. Y'all got fooled into thinking he's a boxer.
On top of this, our perceptions may disillusion us. Mike Tyson was never meant to be an autonomous fighter. He's a tool, and his use to Jake Paul was his leverage in this knob of boxing. I feel like I cooked with that metaphor. Yes, yeah. And thirdly, this fight also just kind of showcased an influence society is coming to embrace with internet stars. After all, this bout cleared an astonishing 4 million pay-per-views. The third place position being taken by Logan Paul, Jake Paul's brother, in an exhibition match with Mayweather. Boxing is not just a sport, it's a billion-dollar industry with a globalized fan base. Now now in a digital era of retention, meaning the thrill of the fights and the spectacle of the boxers becomes a lucrative business opportunity with the conflation of people like contractors, advertisers, and marketers. One reason boxing in particular offers a natural home for these events is its business model, which in contrast to other combat sports, offers athletes the opportunity to make enormous sums of money. Despite the Ultimate Fighting Championship being the biggest combat sports entity in the world, the organization regularly kneecaps its fighters with long-term contracts and sponsorship exclusivity clauses, as well as holding on to nearly 90% of the market share in the sport. Boxing, on the other hand, is not beholden to a single promotion and sanctioning body, and therefore allows its star fighters to function in a freer market, steering their own careers according to their own values and interests. In a sense, with boxing, the contractor controls the sport by proxy of the storylines in the industry. Without a contractor, you'd have no way to fight. These people match you up with people on ESPN, Sports Network, and all your other events that you find on live TV. And who is the contractor for the Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul fight, you may ask? Well, it was Baka Jake Paul. Jake Paul's digital pull, in terms of having the wealth to hire Mike Tyson, the digital reach to sell that many tickets, makes him the perfect contractor, blending the job of the contractor and the fighter. Jake Paul has found a niche, which allows him to form a religion around his fabrication, and we kind of just watch along. Essentially, I'm saying the influencers have hit the Pentagon, toppling monumentous fights like Muhammad Ali versus Sonny Liston. I mean, you remember this photo, right? Mike Tyson's fight sold like 5 times that. It's wild. Influencers have found a chink in the armor. After all, it is the age of the internet, spearheaded by faces like Logan Paul, hailing from Vine, who's garnished billions off of views of vlogs, and his podcast Impulsive, switching over and now having showings and professional contracts with the WWE, where he just gets like booed. But it doesn't matter because retention is key. Although Logan Paul is not the contractor of his own image like a Jake Paul is, his professional contract to this billion-dollar franchise plays venues around the globe. And this is not just with wrestling. This phenomenon of internet stars creating bigger and bigger spectacles for a digital audience has defined the 21st century's internet culture. This man being the most famous Twitch streamer, and arguably at this point, one of the most famous people in the world, beckons the question of what does retention bring? These figures of stature have become central bastions of interaction as a whole, so much so that companies, governments, schools, and businesses buy their influence, their spectacle, their face, their essence, for a glimpse of the interaction they'll garnish from their influencers' fans. It's ever more increasing. Even commentary spaces of the internet have had the same strains of Viners and TikTokers, like Danny Gonzalez, Curtis Connor, David Dobrik, Liza Koshy, Ben of the Week, Lily Pons, King Bach, come to positions of prominence in niche categories, becoming pivotal faces of art movements in online fashion, hip-hop, comedy, and even politics. After all, Mr. Clean himself, like Joe Rogan, Mr. Clean, acts as a puppet head for Trump's cabinet of podcasters and TV personalities. I'd argue that this process was melded by the digital ethos of the internet. Jake Paul, like everything, exists in the continuum of a digital spectacle. DeBoard uses the word spectacle to describe an overall social phenomenon where everything directly lives, recedes into a representation, describing it as a separate pseudo-world that can only be looked at, created from the rearrangement of fragmented images taken from every aspect of life. This is just academic for saying Jake Paul lives in aesthetic. But that aesthetic is backed up by a very real reality that Mike Tyson, the man he fought and beat, is one of the greatest boxers of all time. And make no mistake, Mike Tyson is everything we saw on that stage. And that's what upsets me. What does greatest of all time mean? Is there a value of individual influence in the genre of sports? Well, to answer that question, let's look at a relatable spectacle. What's the first thing that pops into your mind when I say this? Tony Hawk. The performance of sports first comes with recognizing the spectacle is inseparable from social interaction. In fact, social interaction, be it in the civil atmosphere, aesthetic representation,
No, I've seen you somewhere before, I don't know.
drives the spectacle, fuels the spectacle.
Tony Hawk?
Are you?
No. I get it a lot though.
Factors of influence in sports can help us realize this on a deeper level. Even though the context in which we enjoy a sport in a medium can deviate, we all know at the end of the day, aura farming comes in the way in which a performance is had on stage. We want to know who's best and we want to see them do it in an entertaining manner. No one would think Mike Tyson was Mike Tyson without his knockouts after all. The name Mike Tyson is synonymous with his character of strength. And funnily enough, Strength alone was reason enough to turn him into a video game.
Controller, beat them all, and you've got
This was probably my first experience with Mike Tyson. I learned about influential figures not through a digital algorithm, but through my Xbox and Flipnote Hatna on the DSi, because I couldn't get any other games, because Nintendo, all your games were like $80, bro. Even back then, it was bad, bro. See, as influential as Tony Hawk is, I didn't really know much about Tony Hawk except that his kickflips were cool. I was a broke kid, not gonna lie. However, there used to be this store named EB Games where you could buy physical copies of already sold games. This was called reselling. Digital markets are now situating games more so on online stores in the form of downloads, but this was kind of how the market worked for me back then. All the way back in 2008, I think. 2008. Wow. Yeah, I'm 24. And with $20, me and my dad could walk out with 8 games. It's where I was introduced to NBA Street, College Madden, and a little game called Tony Hawk Pro Skater. By 2001, skateboarding had gained so much popularity that more American people under the age of 18 rode skateboards than played baseball. So much for a national sport. The marketing of sports have created a weird metaphysical space that morphs with how we normalize human interaction throughout the years. See, I think Jake Paul is doing the Tony Hawk method digitally. When it comes to Tony Hawk as a person, in an experience of perception, we've since been spoon-fed in a million different ways. Because we have to remember, the method of relation is us. Think of the general audience like strings. The more strings attached to the method of relation, the more our experience with art expands. However, without things like our phones, televisions, or radios, these strings which form connections to music and media wouldn't be able to form. Essentially, controlling the spectacle means being the most present person at the right time on that TV or on that phone. With the country in a skating epidemic in the 2000s and 97% of boys saying they play video games, Tony Hawk's popularity put him in the perfect place to capture it. On top of appearing in famous shows like Rocket Power, The Simpsons, Lords of Dogtown, and dozens of other appearances in numerous other television fads, you could say. Tony Hawk had all the methods of 2000s relations covered. However, in a new digital age, the spectacle is governed by the algorithm, meaning the conversation of Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul first comes with understanding how the magic of the ring can be captured by an athlete with money as easy as it can. The timeline of skating spans from the 1950s and peaks in the 2000s, meaning a history surrounding the rising popularity of this sport would come to cement Tony Hawk as the face of this craze. A history seeing itself sprouting out of California, absorbing the admiration of youth, being introduced to the sport for almost 50 years in the form of punk fashion, the emergence of skate parks, Vans, Thrashers, Supreme, Killua. Skateboarding by proxy has become one of the most influential spaces that California has created throughout the world. Its history is also a reflection on how sports can be facilitated by a public. Essentially, Tony Hawk has always been the best skateboarder I've always witnessed on my screen, sure, but it was still on my screen. I was one of many captured by the spectacle. Tony Hawk was at the right place at the right time for me. But is his status as a bastion of optimal performance only there because of his fame? Do you know any other skateboarders? This is a serious question. I don't know much.
What's up? It's Tony Hawk, and this guy right here is the godfather of all modern skateboarding tricks. This is
Rodney Mullen, another character present in Tony Hawk's Underground, doubling as one of the most interesting people I've ever had the chance of listening to. Basically invented the freestyle form of skating, present in Tony Hawk's Underground.
I had an intuitive yearning that skating was for me. And when I found these movements and the little subtle things that no one was pointing me, telling me what to do, because I have such a visceral push against being told what to do, especially for this, you know? For the joy of what I'm doing, you're gonna tell me what to do.
Because of him doing this, the man was literally given the title God, godfather of skateboarding. So why is Tony Hawk center stage as the protagonist of the best-selling piece of skateboard media of all time in a freestyle skateboarding game, while Rodney, the godfather of skateboarding, is just kind of there? See, skating, like all sports, revolves around conceptual third space. In sociology, the third space refers to the social surroundings that are separate from the two social environments of the workplace and home. Things like your school's a third place, things like your rec room is a third place, things like the YCMA is a third place, things like the Boys and Girls Club is a back at third place. And the third place of the beach would spring forth skateboarding. See, skateboarding was initially made by a bunch of bored surfers who wanted something to do when the tide got low.
Skateboarding was invented in the 1950s when an industrious surfer disassembled a roller skate and attach the wheels to a piece of wood. The sport gained popularity when roller derby introduced the steel-wheeled sidewalk surfer, further testament to its wave riding.
It blew up incredibly almost overnight. The initial skateboards would more closely resemble longboards. And the fact of the matter is, skateboarding was never really done on my screen. But in a world susceptible to environmental and social change too. After all, there was a reason why all these skaters you've seen have been white. And why indoor roller skating, on the other hand, is so dominant in black culture.
When desegregation began in the late 50s and early 60s, some roller rink owners did not take kindly to it. They decided to create themed nights specifically targeted towards African Americans.
The ideation of third spaces also fractured reality in a way which would see a history of social exclusion has limited the third spaces black populations in Los Angeles have been able to enjoy. See, while Jim Crow laws were in effect in the 1960s, black roller skaters protested segregation at rinks with skate-ins. In 1963, 27-year-old Ledger Smith, nicknamed Roller Man, skated from Chicago to Washington, D.C., which is a journey that took 10 days, and he did this all while carrying a sign that said freedom. He skated nearly 700 miles to witness Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, addressed at the March at Washington for jobs and freedom. In the 1980s, roller rinks like Compton Skateland and Mid-City World's On Wheels became a hotspot for up-and-coming artists, including Queen Latifah, NWA, and Dr. Dre. The rinks were also safe havens from gang violence in South LA. Racially, America would see itself separate black and white third spaces, creating two different but similar sister sports of communal relativity. And although third places like swimming pools are essentially a crux of Californian culture, at least I can tell from like it seems like there's a lot of pool parties going on there, but it doesn't really seem like there's a lot of swimming going on. It just seems like it's a lot of standing pool parties. The widespread economic prosperity of post-World War II America, combined with radical changes in urban planning regulations, resulted in the reconstruction of more than 150,000 swimming pools in California during the 1960s. When you factor in the reality that skaters use swimming pools, you'll start to see why this history of exclusion takes place. I mean, did you know there used to be free amusement parks from the 1920s to 1960s available for public use?
Coney Island, the world's greatest fun frolic, with its beach miles long, all peppered with people, the place where merriment is king.
In the early 20th century, Coney Island in New York City drew over 1 million visitors a day to its 3 world-famous attractions: Luna Park, Dreamland Park, and Steeplechase. Coney Island, like urban amusement parks across the country, captivated audience with the intense sensations of being jolted, whirled, and thrown together. It gave a sense of freedom and exhilaration missing from most people's lives. As you can tell, the emphasis on most, it's gonna play a big role here. Tom Owen, a University of Louisville archivist, states,
"Now, Fountain Ferry was a destination, but it wasn't a destination for everyone.
From 1905 to 1964, African Americans were not allowed.
I have read the testimony and heard the testimony of African Americans in our community who had their faces pressed up against the fence at Fountain Ferry, seeing there's fun every minute inside the park, but it was closed to them."
In the 1960s, uniquely, a drought in California would see a lot of its pools drained for water supply reasons, creating 2 different sister sports locked in an instance of race. Skateboarding was already popular well before the 1960s, but the circumstance of hollowed pools from the drought, a new way to create more efficient wheels for skate parks, and the combined social reality of skate parks being more present in white societies because of federal governments that were funding third spaces for white communities, centered this spectacle or this sport well away from black households. See, I was drawn to a lot of Jet Set Radio's art as a child.
Somewhere in Asia, there's a city that cannot be found on any map called Tokyo.
And as I'm growing up, I'm realizing these contextual conversations matter. This game managed to spew together an intricate story of a fight against hatred, greed, and corporate corruption, similarly felt by the protesting black roller skaters.
The 2 hottest things in the streets of Tokyo are the punks wearing magnetically driven inline skates powered by newly developed Metrium batteries and Jet Set Radio.
Culturally defying a prohibited third space. Spray paint the walls as an act of defiance. If they don't want you here, make it known that you are and you don't give a fuck.
Pirate radio station, manned by the DJ Professor K, that plays nothing but non-stop hardcore music.
The most compelling part of the gameplay, however, was not winning the game.
They roam the streets and cover the city with their personal graffiti, claiming that it is their way of expressing themselves to the world.
It was the metaphorical idea of a team your skaters embody. A team hell-bent on the conquest of love.
However, ever since the metropolitan government and the financial conglomerate, the Rupkaka Group, combined their efforts to co-found the 21st Century Project, the streets of Tokyo-to have never been the same again.
Combating the subversion of a gentrified, capitalist society where the music industry has taken control of reality. Parallel to the black experience of skating and spray painting, it just makes sense. The black subtext was everywhere.
Police crackdowns on the Rudies have become more severe, and Captain Onishima is more anxious than ever to put them behind bars. The streets of Tokyo-to are ready to explode.
You can't win a level without acquiring a region's central skater. Winning a level means adding a new character into a third space you're radically creating in this chaos. As a friend and companion. Through cooperation, cool skate moves, funny quips, and the appeal to humanity, they made life under torment of oppression seem worth living. I wonder if that's how black Californian skaters felt. Through and through, this game embodied the concept of love. Love as a communal idea. Love as a third space. That's not given to people like Mike Tyson. We could see how the power of allotted third spaces between black and white athletes formed perceptual means of optimal communities for some people. How do I coin this? Communities. That was actually good. Because as cool as Tony Hawk is, let's remember, I got this skating game because jumping 60 feet into the air and flipping is like objectively based. All this to say, Jake Paul is doing the Tony Hawk method in the sport of boxing. Uniquely portrayed though is Mike Tyson's position in boxing. The strongest, the most fearsome. What type of history does that really stem from?
You take into the ring a lot of rage. Does that work for you, or does it work against you at times?
You know, who cares? We're in a fight anyway.
First off, Jake Paul is a conductor, right? He set up multiple matches at this point with multiple fighters, all for the point of making himself like a boxer. When I see a figure we've come to rationalize as like a killing machine, I tend to like ask myself why. And I think we can both understand the experience of spaces being like conceptualized for us from a very young age, you know, back to back.
Drake's last half decent John.
When I was a little boy, the coaches would come up to me because I was like abnormally tall. You know, I was always like a top 4 person in my age group because they wanted me on teams. The genre of sports is kind of like an elusive dream promised to boys through coaching advertisements and a disproportionate level of athletes on screen compared to like any other profession and things like that. It's how I picked up like additional sports like volleyball and soccer. Basically from a very young age, sports seem to assume who I should be. My first question is, how does the unseen power of the spectacle, like, you know, this sport, this masculine performance, rule over a young black boy's dreams in life?
I couldn't have been no more than like Pee Wee or Pop Warner age, but from the time that I can remember, I always gotten, that's a football player. Why you not playing football? Why y'all don't got that boy playing football? And just the way that I am, you know, I actively pushed against that. You feel me? I did not start playing football until I got to high school. And then my sophomore year, I was a letterman. I was a starting varsity. So I'm not gonna lie. Part of me feels like maybe I should have listened to what they were saying, but you know, it's especially coming from environments like where we come from, right? Especially coming from, you know, working class or impoverished environments. You know, it's always I'm not going to say that it's not the only avenue that's presented to you, but it's presented to us as more so of a tangible possibility than to, you know, some white kid in the suburbs somewhere that, you know, be an athlete, be a rapper, be an entertainer of some sort. This is the easy route out of poverty. This is the, you know, the college thing. Yeah. But you know how hard you're going to have to work to overcome all of these but if you can learn to put a ball in a hoop at an early age, you know, that's your route to college right there. You know what I'm saying? I grew up with, you know, with some dudes who that was the goal. The league wasn't even the goal. The goal was, because they knew they wasn't going to make the league, but they just figured if I could just get a ride, you feel me, to some college, then whatever. So, and it goes back to, and this is a conversation that FD and I have had several times about, specifically black men. Our bodies carry so much meaning to them. And a lot of it is negative, quote unquote, positive stereotypes. You understand what I'm saying?
We're going to create a new banner. This is a Jum Doc alert. NBA superstar LeBron James is talking politics again. Here's his barely intelligible, not to mention ungrammatical take on President Trump in a new ESPN podcast.
The number one job in America, the point of person, is someone who doesn't understand the people and really don't give a about the people.
I feel like our team as a country is not ran by a great coach.
It's not even a surprise when he says something. It's not even a surprise. It's like laughable. It's like
it's laughable.
It's laughable and it's scary.
But it's also scary because I shouldn't be numb to your racist comments.
Right.
I shouldn't be numb to your behavior.
I'm numb to this commentary. Must they run their mouths like that?
When you black, it's not a movement. It's a lifestyle.
Unfortunately, a lot of kids and some adults take these ignorant comments seriously. Look, there might be a cautionary lesson in LeBron for kids. This is what happens when you attempt to leave high school a year early to join the NBA. And it's always unwise to seek political advice from someone who gets paid $100 million a year to bounce a ball. Oh, and LeBron and Kevin, so keep the political commentary to yourself, or as someone once said, shut up and dribble.
Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Allen Iverson. Unique to Jake Paul is how he's been able to transfigure the idea of an athlete in the hands of digital ownership, making contracts with streaming services and having his own marketing brand. See, when we talk about black athletes as athletes, we have to realize we're talking about them as athletes and not owners. In franchises which we understand are full of black players, usually the ownership is white.
The NFL remains rife with racism, particularly when it comes to hiring and retention of black head coaches, coordinators, and general managers. That statement is from the opening pages of Brian Flores' class action lawsuit against the league. Flores was fired as the head coach of the Miami Dolphins 3 years into his 5-year contract. In the lawsuit, Flores states, in certain critical ways, the NFL is racially segregated and is managed much like a plantation. There's only one black head coach in the NFL. 4 teams have a black offensive coordinator, and just 11 teams, or 34%, employ a black defensive coordinator.
The NFL's players are 70% black, its fans are 83% white, and 64% male, according to online sports site The Real GM. Michael Jordan is really the only black player that went on to be an owner, and that was after snatching the epitome, like the visceral idea of popular. This man had to run American social order for a while. The idea of sports is sometimes marketed through the presentation of black bodies, and in a sense we're dissuaded as these statures of influence as needed statures of influence. This creates a predatory system where white owners can benefit off of a standard of an athlete that they paid for, buying and trading them for businesses as they're contractually obliged. A pattern of grandeur that ever so slightly holds the knife.
I just wanted to fight out my contract and renegotiate as free. But a month after, we get a call from Hunter or somebody there. Yeah, they said, let's talk about a new deal for Francis. And at that time, there's not a new deal. We just want to fight, It's already September, and my last fight was in June. I want to fight. So the new deal staff be holding me back. They didn't give me a fight.
Because they wanted you to sign a new deal.
They wanted me to fight a new deal.
You didn't want to sign a new deal. You wanted to fight your contract down and
I wanted to fight my contract down.
I lost. I didn't lose anything. I was done with Francis after the... Actually, he owes me money because we had to watch that fight with him and the Black Beast. He should actually pay me back for that fight.
The reality is white owners hold the lives of dozens of black athletes at a time, determining their raises, play times, earnings, when they eat, how they work out, how they'll play. Now, they're getting paid tens of millions of dollars, sure. But do you see how losing bits of your humanity is a condition in order to be a person like Kobe Bryant? You know how much he had to work? But I'm gonna extend this. In a sense of self, you could even say Kobe Bryant predates his own existence with his own conceptually marketed image. Remember the Mont Fair in New York, that amusement park third space that we kind of went over? Well, fun fact, Mike Tyson is from New York, but before he met his trainer in a prison, sadly, his third place. The culture around black athleticism was horse racing, and it happened on Fairmount soil. The hard work and determination attitude, the grandeur, the splendors in the face of oppression has been defined by the black athlete in American horse racing, which makes sense. Ora farming is a means of ancestral relation, and nothing is cooler than beating a white man piously on a 100-yard field his daddy bought from a plantation. At the times of the plantation, though, the Snow Sardines were wealthy landowners, mostly in the American South, and they took great joy in pitting up their slaves against each other in these circular horse races. The earliest African-American jockey known was Monkey Simon, who rode at the Clover Bottom Racetrack in Tennessee in 1806, and then in the 1820s, horse racing became the most popular sport in the United States, and a large number of the best trainers and jockeys in the country were African Americans. This because black people were like the caretakers of white people and their horses too. And that entails raising them and training them. But the social benefit of having a horse was still accredited to its owner. There was no real personal value in a jockey regarding horse racing, so the horses were kind of seen as more important. So the money at the time was centered on having a good, strong, well taken care of, like good bred horse type thing. The black jockey had to redefine the spectacle of his own job in order to gain merit in this sport. In the antebellum South, the main center of racing, riders were still mainly slaves, while in the North, owners using Englishmen or local white people. The jockeys were not well known, and then briefly, the Civil War put an end to racing. In the 1860s, all available horses were needed for the military, and during this time, you could find black jockeys literally hiding horses from the British Army, enlisting in the army to fight for their own rights, and going out to fight for an aspect of community and ownership that they could have in the future. And as we all know, the good guys won apparently. But in the years following the Civil War, white people would call it the pre-war era, black people would call it the Jim Crow era. This was after the Emancipation Proclamation denounced slavery, but allowed for segregation as an instilled systemic ideology in society. It was weird. It was give and take. Then in 1875, the Civil Rights Act bill was passed, and Louisville's Jockey Club, later renamed Churchill Downs, started integrating black people. And only 5 days after the fact, a rider named Murphy would define this period of the black athlete. The Kentucky Derby, hosted in 1875, saw 13 out of the 15 black jockeys represented as African American, including the winner, Oliver Lewis. From being restricted to third places like schools, railroads, and racing tracks just a year prior, surviving in a role adjacent to their value with a white owner, and then breaking away from this legal constriction signified a great hope for black communities. Competition being on a level playing field was a huge contender of social debate too. Murphy, a predecessor to the idea of a black athlete Mike Tyson would embody in a completely different sport almost 100 years later, was a prominent face in this new emerging sport of horse racing. Along with biking and baseball, they became the most popular crazes in America. Try as they may, certain white hopes like Garrison would see themselves defeated by Murphy and a number of other black jockeys. Murphy bought 7 acres of land, unlike the 30 acres and a mule promised to his counterpart, slowly fading out of sight. The very real material reality of Murphy's fame was a miracle in himself, you could say. He was given the promised idea of the American dream. He and his wife moved into a large home in Kentucky. He bought land in Chicago. Communities and jockeys were forming to the extent in which when Murphy did Tony Hamilton's reception for his marriage, it was called the Black Lexington Event of the Year. Between 1890 and 1899, 6 of the 9 derbies were won by black jockeys. Instead of being an elitist method of transport, black jockeys were bringing individual merit to the sport of racing. No longer was the black body a slave, but now a spectacle of newfound black acclaim in America. Murphy bought mink coats, the best clothes you could imagine, and was even accompanied by a young white valet. As a black man, that was unheard of. He earned more than the Chicago White Stockings baseball team, which was around $15,000 to $20,000 a year, while the average worker, by comparison, made between $500 and $1,000 a year. In the same way the NBA and NFL exist as cultural juggernauts in 2025, deemed as too big to fail, horse racing was the same conglomerate too. The athletes were too important to the sport, it was said. Within 20 years, however, the black jockey fizzled out and died. This phenomenon is coined as jockey syndrome in the book $40 Million a Slave, defined by changing the rules of the game when met with the challenge of white supremacy. The key push to exclude black jockeys came when white jockeys began violently attacking their African American counterparts by boxing them out during races, running them into the rail, and hitting them with riding crops. These attacks prevented black jockeys from finishing in the mud and endangered fragile and valuable racehorses. Soon after the attacks began, African-American jockeys found they could not get rides. Anxiety over job insecurities appears to play an important role in white jockeys' actions. They were afraid of the monetary achievement made with these black communities. There was only a limited number of riding slots after all. Combined with the growing anti-gambling crusade that reduced attendance at racetracks and eliminated some tracks entirely. This was because horse jockeys started the tradition of sports betting when owners realized the black racers were winning with whatever horse they had, clocking in at some of the smallest and biggest weigh-ins. Something continued on in the visage of Mike Tyson and in the sport of boxing. Jockeys found demand for their services contracting. Owners tactically participated in the expulsion of African-American jockeys. For some, it could have been a matter of prejudice, but for others, it was a business decision. Why employ a black jockey if white jockeys would use violence to prevent him from finishing in the money and risking damaging a valuable horse in the process? The truth was, this new monetary incentive, propelled by a history of intercommunal oppression, bought Murphy's imagination, and a lot of us by awe in proxy of the spectacle. To make a contingent slave, you must make a thoughtless one. It is necessary to darken his moral and mental vision, and as far as possible, to annihilate his power of reason. He must be able to detect no inconsistency in slavery. The man who takes his earnings must be able to convince him that he has all the right to do so. A slave must have no higher law than his master's will. The whole relationship must demonstrate to a public its absolute rightfulness. Essentially, the Troy Bolton I always envisioned existed in Murphy once upon a time, the same way it's carried on in LeBron James. However, layered in the spectacle, in the MVPs, in the figure, and in the salaries is a history of purposeful characterization, not removed from social strife. The ritual of cheering for our prized heroes of worships extends further back than 2025. Sure, you could say Jim Jeffries versus Johnson in 1910. The historical fight for boxing in terms of solidifying the black athlete Mike Tyson would become was monumental, but up till then, multiple sports and avenues of participation restricted by identity, integral to solidifying the stature of Mike Tyson 100 years later. Thank you so much for joining the channel again, Masculinity to me has always been a performance, we know this, but I want to provide a groundwork for what this even means in a real sense, See, I saw masculinity in sports present around me. Since my favorite pastime was basketball, the majority of my friends were made through that interactive space, you could say. And usually the space was one you would see little kids, more specifically little boys. And basketball was also low-key a little bit of my therapy. I was able to vent, I was able to talk about life, create friendships, be on a team with a bunch of other boys in this little, kind of structure we had, I guess you could say. The performance of masculinity translating into all of us little boys playing basketball gave us a basis for masculine interaction to take place, you could say. But to a man like you that does jujitsu, goes to the gym, dumps their face in cold water, all this, how is it like for you forming a basis of masculinity?
I very early on realized that I had been reading a script of masculinity before I knew even how to read, until I interacted with the other. And the other would be people that look like me but are different from me. I realized that, oh, this is a mirror. This is a mirror, and your distortion is making dissonance within myself. So essentially what I mean by that is engaging with black queer men and their performance of masculinity really reified how established mine was, to the point where I never questioned it. I began to really question the constructs of gender, masculinity, femininity, and how all of these things, essentially just different tools in a toolkit of societal performance. All of it is made up, and we ascribe particular things to particular people as a means of trying to understand the schemas of the world. My masculinity in particular has grown, has transformed over time. And now as a father, a first-time dad, I'm now more cognizant of the different ways in which these scripts are enforced upon people. Weirdly enough, and I know I might get some heat from it, a lot of these scripts are enforced by our mothers, women in our lives, women that we care about a lot of the time. My mom really reinforced and sometimes discouraged particular things in my masculinity because, of course, she was trying to make it easier for me, and she knew what it was, even in a black nation like the Bahamas, to subvert that masculine norm, to be anything different than the strong black man. So quite often she would discourage me from crying or discourage me from doing anything that didn't fit that very narrow mold of masculinity. And I'm now almost therapeutically having to prevent her from doing what is called ghosts of the cradle, which is essentially a concept where the parent of the child begins to parent through the parent of the child. So I begin to dole out particular punishments to my child, and almost a disembodied voice is resounding in my head, rules and vituperations and scripts. And I'm trying to figure out, where did that come from? And I'm just like, oh, that's my parents. And even though they're not parenting my child, they are still parenting my child by way of kind of endowing me with some of these bigotries. And then I end up having to check myself. Your child teaches you a lot of the different ways in which your trauma lays out. And if any other parents, especially dads, are watching, definitely want to get your traumas in check before you have a child, ideally, because they definitely show up. Long roundabout way of answering your question, but essentially masculinity, and more so just like this adherence and conforming to gender norms, is a scam. And we can redefine, as you've been doing, what masculinity is and how it translates for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I would say in the same way, you know, I was kind of constricted to a sense of identity, I guess my mother or father envisioned in me. But, you know, to my African parents, that was simply just work. Right? Like, I'm like, as a dude, you gotta work, you gotta work, you gotta work, you gotta work, you gotta do this, this, and this. I never really was restricted by a mold of gendered perception that a lot of, you know, black youth out there are in the same way. Like, I was able to like braid my hair. I was able to learn how to braid my hair from my auntie and everything. I was able to like do a bunch of things that like the people on my auntie's side were doing just because like I wanted to, right? And no one really like questioned it. But you know, as I got into like a lot of circles of masculinity, I would say that a lot of key figures, even in black masculinity, like Kevin Durant on a basketball court, has influenced who I am just through existing, you know what I'm saying? Whereas being constantly compared to him while I'm playing basketball, and not to say I'm like a 7-foot demigod scoring like on LeBron James, you know, but I was a tall person that I like to shoot the basketball. And you could say the spectacle of Kevin Durant predating me also gave me a basis of projected masculinity even as a child, because I watched Kevin Durant. I liked Kevin Durant. Now, boxing has long since been situated around the idea of individual strength. But this also meant, however, that those in front of the mic had a very unique platform. Mike Tyson is very straight to the point, brutal, rugged, as with the portrayal of his boxing. See, as scary as Mike Tyson perceivably is, look at him. He used to look like this. The sport of boxing has a very conventional lens, you could say. A figure like Muhammad Ali would see him labeled as a clown early on in his career for doing things like speaking in poetry, practically writing love letters and sonnets, soliloquies even, about how he's gonna beat a dude's ass.
Been chopping trees. I done something new for this fight. I done wrestled with an alligator. That's right. I have wrestled with an alligator. I done tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning, throw thunder in jail. That's bad.
You can call Ali's performance of masculinity silly all you want. The fact is, though, he still won. Essentially, what I'm saying is, throughout Mike Tyson's career, he wasn't always this conventionally strong, stereotypical figure. He just had to be. Mike Tyson was caught in a double bind since birth. Conflicting definitions are all but a mystery to most of us children.
Fighting was my life. Regardless of how I was living my life, fighting was my life. Fighting. There's something about fighting. We do it more than we have sex.
You always hear grow up. You always hear be a man, but you never hear hit the pen. Mary Pentoinette never came in at 4 a.m. and said let them hit vapes. It was the tooth fairy, right? Strength to Mike Tyson, however, came conceptually, you could say. See, the problem with Mike Tyson is our internalized definition of his character.
I'm the most brutal and vicious and most ruthless champion there's ever been. There's no one can stop me. Lynx is a conqueror. No, I'm Alexander. He's no Alexander. I'm the best ever.
His story begins in 1976. In Brownsville, Brooklyn.
Crime infested, drug infested.
Poverty was really everything in the world down there.
bouncing around place after place with the financial crisis of America. On top of the constricting concrete surroundings of Brooklyn, Mike Tyson would state in the book, The Undisputed Truth, that he was bullied constantly as a child. Since our social interactions with peers formed the foundation of communal understanding in our youth, you could see how Mike Tyson's third space of school forced him to gravitate towards those bullies.
I don't even, oh God, it's being on welfare, sometimes not being on welfare where you have to fend for yourself.
It's also stated he never chose to fight back. As a 10-year-old child, this experience would go on to scope his worldview. One time he watched a bully crush his glasses and stuff it in a drain pipe. Mike Tyson had Disney bullies, bro. These bullies was from Zack and Cody. Perceptually, as a child, contrary to his terrifying persona, Mike Tyson was called Fairy Boy by his peers, who recognized his lips. But this man just didn't fit the performance of masculinity on a level Mike Tyson could vibe with. Notably, he says his brother was a scientific nerd with beakers in his room. In his book, he goes as far as calling it white people shit. On top of this, his mother ran a brothel in his house. Mike would note that he saw his mother dress up women before sending them into a room with the man, waiting in his book Undisputed. Sometimes he'd have to sleep in the same bed as them, with the men still there. Well, even understand as he might, Mike Tyson, just like any other kid, was subjected to social rules of normativity, both with his peers and in the household. See, Mike Tyson would also be called Dirty Ike amongst these insults because he didn't bathe. Little did they know, Mike Tyson didn't even have access to hot water. Eventually, this pressured Mike Tyson to leave school and take up, and funnily enough, eventually just take up pigeon racing. This man loved pigeons. Mike Tyson would skip school, come to lunch, and then skip again. During one of these skipping sessions, after wandering around the neighborhood, a couple older men tried to rob Mike Tyson. Seeing he had no money, they came to an agreement. Maybe he could run a couple errands for them, and fearing for his life, he did. The task he had was to keep these pigeons the men were breeding in order to make money off of them in pigeon racing bets. Mike Tyson slowly fell in love with the pigeons and came back the next day pleading to continue his job, and they allowed him. Instead of going to school, Mike Tyson would now take care of these pigeons.
They're here because they love me. This bird has a bond with me. This is my bird. I never went to school because I got bullied all the time. That's why I got involved with pigeons, because I was skipping school to avoid the bullies. My life sucked as a kid. I was just bullied all. I hate my childhood life.
Mike Tyson was also sneaking into houses and picklocking doors for the olders to break in. However exploitative of an experience it was, Mike Tyson found community.
Well, my mother knew I was stealing. She knew it. And she knew Santa Claus didn't come to the neighborhood. My mother always told me I was going to go to jail, and I was going to turn out to be a bum.
Bounce off and run away, stay away for days, weeks. Stay away, like you're 12 years old.
The experience of leaving school and being situated with the wrong people led Mike Tyson to first become a pocket pigeon racer. This autobiography was made by him and 50 Cent. So of course some things may be sensationalized, stretched. All the women are called like the B word all the time. It's weird. But Mike Tyson's first relatable figure in his life actually came with his sister.
Well, my sister was the boss of the house. She fought for me and she beat me up too. So she was like a mother figure, dominating mother figure.
In his books, he recounts on how they used to watch wrestling together and frequently hang out. Structurally, Mike Tyson's upbringing is reminiscent of the ways masculinity, or a caricature of it, is internalized. While words can hurt, Mike learned there are certain rules he had to follow. On top of that, whether it was as seemingly small as bathing to not get jumped by a group of kids, he also learned violently that he just didn't intrinsically fit into the definition of those rules. After one day, being beaten to the point where he had to turtle over meatballs he had for lunch in the face of a bully, because he knew that was the only meal he was going to get that day. The money Mike Tyson used pigeon racing and pickpocketing, or however little he got of it from the olders who kept most of it, he was using for groceries for his mother and more pigeons for himself. There's extents of crippling poverty that you guys need to get is so insatiably hard to get out of. I am very thankful for having a YouTube channel and having a lot of supporters, you know what I mean, that got me out of like precarious situations in my life. I got this like wicked scar to prove it. I got like cut above the eye, like right here. We have to understand that a huge part of Mike Tyson's frustrations as a child was something as simple as paying a bill for running or having food at lunch that the bullies couldn't steal. This practice, however heinous, benefited his life at a base point of functionality. At least he could eat now. At least he didn't have to watch his mother cry over an energy bill. But To put it simply, these activities made Mike Tyson feel like he's doing something for the people around him. In a world where autonomy felt constricted in a vacuum of circumstance, Mike Tyson would find a means of changing the environment around him in a different way, his hands being instruments of modification. But right now, the boy didn't really have any incentive to use them physically. He liked collecting doves. He liked his new group of friends. And then one day, his mother started yelling at him, "Mike, they're outside! Mike, they're outside!" He ran outside and saw all the neighborhood kids watching this random boy messing with Mike Tyson's doves.
I had all these birds one day that, that just suddenly popped up in this living room of mine. So some guy, I told some friends of mine from another neighborhood, and they brought some other guys from the neighborhood to steal the birds. Look, when I got my mother to get my birds, "Mom, help me." Right. And one guy put a bird in and ran out. So I ran after him. "Please give me my bird. Please, can I have my bird? Oh, you want your bird?" First smack me. "You want this?" When
Mike Tyson tried to beg for him to stop, he held the dove up to Mike Tyson's face and twisted the bird's neck off. Mike Tyson, now being chanted, cheered, pushed to fight by his neighbors, by himself, by God, by everything he loved, by everything he knew and he cared. In the heat of the moment, he knocked that other little boy out in one punch. Everyone was shocked. It was then and there that the other boys and adults started betting money in a prize fighting style neighborhood arena to pit Mike Tyson up against their best fighters. See, Mike Tyson didn't really care because Mike Tyson was getting bits and pieces of the reward. Life for Mike Tyson was beginning to change. Now he was being respected, feared, where he was teased and beaten on in the past. Now he could go band for band with most of the kids' parents. Mike Tyson had to fight out of a perception of character implaced on him by the world, defining his self-worth. He learned approved notions of masculinity associated with physical strength and protection, heterosexuality with the slurs, obsessions with sex, emotional toughness, and stoicness. Traits that fall outside of this idea of masculinity are associated with being weak, emotional, gay, feminine. These ideas can become so pervasive and idealized, allowing them to flourish and permeate into everyday life. Mike Tyson would later in life recall, "Fighting was big in my neighborhood. If you were such a good fighter, you had respect. I was especially good at that sneaky sucker punch, but I didn't win all my fights. I got beat up a lot because I was fighting older men. I was 11 or 12 and I was fighting guys in their 30s because I beat them in a dice game. They didn't want to pay a little kid. Those men might have guns, but I didn't care. They knew I wasn't a punk and they had to fight or pull out a gun and hit me with it." Mike Tyson would also unleash internalized anguish created by these bullies back onto them. He recounts beating them on recognition, no matter where he caught them. He pathologizes this by stating his bullies didn't care when they had the strength Mike Tyson lacked. So why should that guy who took Mike Tyson's glasses and threw them away all those years ago, causing him to leave school, he, quote, beat him in the streets like a dog. Mike Tyson states, "With my petty criminal life and with all this trouble came the law. I was spending more and more time in Spofford." The actual name of the place was Bridges Juvenile Center, a rat-infested hellhole on Spofford Avenue in Hunts Point section of the house.
As Mike describes it, it was like almost walking into Cheers, because it was like, "Yo, Mike, yo." All the kids from Brooklyn were there.
It was like a family reunion.
Eventually, Mike Tyson would be sent to a place worse than juvie, the state penitentiary with the adults. However, it was here he met the man that would change his life. As much as the financial climate of New York was disproportionately felt by Mike Tyson and a lot of the black boys he was situated with, all avenues Mike Tyson were given was met with the means of restriction, even boxing. Kids having restricted access to a balance which floats the family unit, like a stable income, found means of feeding themselves in other ways. Although this was horrible, it was a structurally emplaced reality. See, there's this social idea based on a moral obligation to see those who do harm punished. And in a social sense, I can see how that holds ground. Order is often better handled than chaos after all. However, I want to question the idea from a reality of everyday life in New York. See, how exactly are we punishing these people who do wrong? What's the concept of wrong here? Mike Tyson, like many others, didn't learn from being handcuffed. He was scrutinized and made a mockery to his neighborhood, assuming the role out of shame and out of need. He ended up being detained almost 40 more times, now being completely ostracized from community, as his neighbors and friends were onto his criminal activity, as according to his book, even being shunned by figures who held his hope in bonds alive, like his mother and his sister. Mike Tyson fell further and further into a world that was second nature to him. What structure is there to fall back on that doesn't exist? Well, the answer is one that Mike was familiar with. And one day, while he was in one of these prisons, Mike Tyson stated they were showing the movie The Greatest, a 1977 movie where Muhammad Ali plays himself. And when the movie was over, the lights came on, and all of a sudden, Ali walked out on stage and the place just exploded. Ali started talking to us about being in detention, and he was saying how he had been in jail and how he had lost all hope of reality. He was just saying beautiful, inspirational stuff. That speech was a game changer for me. It's not that I wanted to become a boxer after hearing him. I just knew that I wanted to be famous. I wanted the feeling that when I walk in a room, people bow down and lose their minds. But I didn't know what I was gonna have to do for people to do that. All this to say, Mike Tyson, now seeing himself cast into a system of borderline government institutional oppression, was given a ray of hope. Then he was transferred to Tyrone School for Boys on the case of being a non-violent offender. Mike Tyson would soon meet the eyes of the prison's boxing coach, although he didn't really describe this place like a prison. The Tyrone School for Boys was light years away from Spofford. It was in the woods, an hour northwest of Albany. There was an indoor swimming pool, a nice gym, and programs that include raising pheasants. Because they didn't consider me a violent offender, I was initially placed in a cottage where I had my own room with no lock on the door. After being sent into isolation for his hostility towards the other boys, he heard some boys talking outside of his cottage. "Hey, what's going on there?" Mike yelled. One of the guys reportedly told him that they just finished sparring with Mr. Stewart, one of the guards. Apparently, he had a boxing program, and everyone who was in it was always laughing and happy. Mike Tyson said, "A light switched then. The same one he saw with Ali. The spectacle. He can capture it." He decided he wanted to get in on that program, then and there. Mike Tyson had that same ideation of the athlete ingrained in him. LeBron, Tony Hawk, Michael Jordan. What we constantly tend to find in a through line of sports is almost a created mythos which warps realities for the spectacles they embody. Although we all love and know these stars, we don't know the scenarios in which made a Tony Hawk the most likely face to be a Tony Hawk, and a Mike Tyson the most likely face to be a Mike Tyson. After all, the conversational aspect of sports are fueled by the inner workings of our perception. You tell me who's better, Michael Jordan or LeBron James? Like, let's face it, in 2025, we kind of have a Gen Z answer already. After all, we do live in a clip society. I mean, in an age where 8-second videos are viewed by the eyes of millions, context is now allowed to shift.
When did y'all lose your virginity? I lost my shit last year.
Expose him! LeBron James,
LeBron equals 1.
and other athletes by proxy are given a huge relevancy bias in the age of digital interaction. Sure, you could say LeBron James is better than a Michael Jordan, just off of glaze alone. However, when put into picture, in a frame of time, the debate of Michael Jordan versus LeBron is contextual to the many captured moments in basketball. The shot, the crossover, T-Mac's 14 points in 7 seconds, Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game, Bill Russell's 12 championships, Kobe Bryant's photo when he won his finals. When we talk about greatness in the modern day with someone like a LeBron James, it's a greater conversation of talent in the spectacle. We know athletes because of what they do and the trophies they get, but not what they mean. When LeBron James came back from a 3-1 deficit against the Warriors, carrying a franchise on his shoulders, he received the Bill Russell Award that centered him as the best man on the team. He deserved it. But the history on that trophy, why is it so important? Its jaded face, unflinching signature pose, and cold stature tells a story of a voice metaphorically stuck in that statue that would so pivotally center black issues in the sport that he derives from. This statue is a dude that's won more championships than LeBron James and Michael Jordan combined. He made shot blocking popular in the 1950s. In his first finals, he had a record number of rebounds. And this was in his rookie year. Michael Jordan said, the man's name was Bill Russell. And Michael Jordan has stated, Bill Russell was a pioneer. He paved the way and set the record for every black player who came after him, including me. It's that Ali spark. When Bill Russell joined the Celtics, there were 15 other black people in the league. He was the only black person on his team. In his memoir, he wrote, many of the people who cheered me at the Boston Garden reacted in horror when I tried to purchase a home in the all-white suburb of Reading. However, it might not matter to him if he's in these conversations or not. In fact, Bill Russell is famous for saying,
well, I always had the confidence that my mother and father loved me. And what they taught me was, is that if they loved me, I must be okay. So if other people encounter me and they have a problem with me, my father said, that's their little red wagon.
All his life, he was unwanted. Growing up in an intense period of segregation, he knew being liked was a passageway not deserved for him. Bill Russell would have to play in states that still enacted Jim Crow laws of racial segregation, meaning his wife would be harassed, his kids. He had stories of his father firing bird pellets into crowds of white people jumping black men. This innate individualism, this centering of self in black masculinity, doing what you have to do, fueled Bill Russell's journey. But as a figurehead of an ugly past, he's reserved to be an aesthetic, a trophy, an unmoving bronze figurine, even through his 11-1 championships. A figure from only 60 years ago. Simply put, if we kill third spaces for black youth, restrict funding, while constantly showing them these are what the avenues for love are in a public setting, wiping away history again and again with the horse racers, the basketball players, whether it's in the boxing ring with Ali or basketball with LeBron, then likewise, the internalizations of a child will be had with their emplaced experience. The spectacle is all-encompassing and feasts on black bodies. Mike Tyson, like Bill Russell, felt he had to do what he needed to do. The figure of Mike Tyson was born out of a need of obedience. He understood he had to play a role to become a good boxer, but first he had to be a good inmate. He started being more calm, polite, cleaning up, getting into less trouble all the time, while begging to see Mr. Stewart. The staff would call saying, all he wants to do is talk to you. Eventually, Stewart came to Mike's room. He smashed the door open to intimidate him after hearing he was a rowdier inmate. But Mike Tyson scampered, got on his knees, and just begged. I want to be a fighter, he said. So do the rest of the guys, Stewart barked. If they were fighters, they wouldn't be here in the first place. They'd be out in the street, going to school, getting a job. We deal with losers here. Before Mike Tyson was this millionaire boxer and stature in black culture. In every which way, he was objectified or personified to fit a means of self that gave him hope. And with that, Mike Tyson was set to train with Stewart.
No coincidence that they nigga. You understand what I'm saying? So that's the perception of blackness. And the flip side of that is that there's this expectation that if you don't play sports, or if you don't excel at sports, then there's something wrong with you. You know what I mean? If you sit in the house all day, doing math problems, but you can't put a ball in a hoop, you can't run a 40 and 4 or 5 flat, you can't do, it's something not right there. And so that plays a lot, especially with because I was there. I've never been good at basketball. You feel me? I've just always been bigger and stronger than everybody else, but I couldn't really play. So that's how they started calling me Baby Shaq, because I couldn't shoot for, you know what I mean? But I could bully you, So once I started playing for actually playing for leagues with actual rules, and they nah, you can't do that, I was garbage. You feel me? But I say that to make the point that did make me feel some type of way, because in my mind, I'm black. You feel me? This is supposed to be natural for me. This is supposed to be like a duck the water. These little white boys is not supposed to be, running circles around me on the court. This ain't right. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that's the perception. Again, our bodies carry so much meaning, and the vast majority of it is negative. But most people don't see it as negative, because in the immortal words of Paul Mooney, everybody want to be a nigga, but don't nobody want to be a nigga, right?
Yeah.
They want our supposed sexual prowess. They want our athleticism. They want, as Foreign Man once put it, that the ineffable coolness of black masculinity. But then when the cops show up, playtime is over, recess is over with, right? So that's what makes it negative, is that it turns our identity, and you cosplaying it. It turns it into a costume. It turns black masculinity into a costume, is what it does.
Yeah, and basketball is my main sport. I've been playing basketball since we damn near came here, and my dad was okay, we got to put this little boy into something. So they threw me in basketball because that's what all the other black people were doing around me, right? So I was playing basketball way before my coach saw me. I was playing basketball in grade 2, for teams. I was on 2 different teams in grade 2. But when my coach saw me, he too thought of me as a center because of my height. You know what I mean? However, I trained from grade 2 all the way till 12 to play shooting guard. And this formed a kind of clash in my reality, right? Sure, I was strong and I was tall, but I was nowhere as strong as the top 3 boys they pick on everybody's team in order to play center. Right. So as a center, I was not getting enough minutes. I was being pushed around. I was left aside because there were people shorter than me who could do my job, because I was literally that skinny. You know what I mean? So sports became a place where I didn't belong in my coach's eyes. But when I went to another team and I was playing shooting guard, all of a sudden I was one of the best in the province. So in a certain sense, I get what you mean, where you're really restricted by your coach's eyes, where they want you to fit this certain mold of a player that they see you in. And like me dribbling, like one time when I was dribbling up the court and I did a crossover under my legs, I got through a dude, right? The coach called it street ball and then benched me. And he said, why you bringing the ball up? That's street ball. And then he benched, in terms of like getting boys to play like a bigger role on a whole team. I feel like there's unseen consequences of attainment coaches place on specifically black little boys, because the thing is, like, the other boys around me, they was a bunch of different places. They were from a bunch of different places because we in Edmonton, they was from the Philippines, they was from India, they was from places in Africa, bunch of different places. So but usually it was like the Filipinos are playing point guard and these people are playing shooting guard, but the black boys they're playing center. You know what I mean? What criteria did you have to tick to even be like seen by your coach in the first place?
Be big.
Who got you involved in boxing in the first place?
I was in an institution. I was locked up. I met this guy named Irish Bobby Stewart, and he used to train me every, once I got my grades up and I had to, submit. He used to train me, and I was getting good. And one day, I think he had a black eye, or his nose got broken, and he was mad the next day. And I thought he was mad and wasn't going to box with me.
Listen, man, my wife is mad, Stewart says to an 11-year-old Mike Tyson after sparring sessions, after workout sessions, after managing to come present to his classes time and time again, and finding a spark in a new hobby. He's being told some bad news. I'm coming home with a broken nose and black eyes, Stewart laments. I can't box with you no more. Mike Tyson's heart dropped, his one hope taken away. What would he do? I mean, this was everything to him. Where else? But Stewart says, I'm going to take you somewhere where they're going to take you to the next level. You think you want to do that? Because I believe when you get out of here, you're going to get killed or locked up again. Mike Tyson, still feeling a twinge of uncertainty, yells, no! He protests as good as any 10-year-old boy can. I don't want to go. I want to stay here with you. Stewart looks at him hard and says, I want you to work with Cus D'Amato. He's a famous trainer. He took Floyd Patterson to the heavyweight title. He made Jose Torres into a heavyweight champ. He takes kids if they behave and work hard. Maybe you could even stay at his house with him. Cus's gym was on top of a police station in Catskill. Inside, it was old and musty, and there was a small ring. There were also a lot of weather-beaten newspaper clips on the wall. There were a few older white guys there, along with a younger guy named Teddy Atlas, who was assisting Cus. Mike was introduced to Cus, and in a second, Mike could see that Cus was totally in control of everything that happened there. He just sucked up all the air in the room. He shook Mike's hand, and there wasn't a trace of a smile on his face. Cus showed no emotions. Right away, Teddy Atlas took one look and said, we've got nobody to box with him. Stewart said that he was gonna box Tyson, and they got in the ring. Tyson was really good that first round, pressing Stewart and banging away at him. Cus smiled for the first time. Wow, he said. That's beautiful. After getting hit with a couple shots, with his nose bleeding profusely, Atlas jumped into the ring. All right, Bobby, we've seen enough, Atlas said. No, Mike protested. Mr. Stewart says we don't quit. If we start, we have to go 3 rounds. On the way to the car, Mike was bursting with anticipation. Can I come back? How did he think I did? Bobby pushed him. Guess what he said? He said I can't come back? Mike was a low self-esteem schmuck, in his own words. No, Cus said. Bobby, bearing outside distractions, that is the heavyweight champion of the world, and possibly in the universe, but only if you continue to work like you've been working. On the ride back to Tyrone, Mike knew he was going to be a success, even though he talked negative and projected himself as a bum. He writes, my inner core thinks I'm a god and I know I'm going to be successful. Every time I say I'm a piece of, or I want to kill myself, that's all confusing the enemy. Everything I say is for a reason, to confuse the enemy. That's a concept that I would soon learn from Cus.
So odd that you said it. My mentor, Cus D'Amato, his objective was to think of nothing. You're nothing, nothing's nothing but the objective, the job, and that was his psychological warfare. Nothing matters. You're nothing. The only thing that matters is the objective, and getting through, accomplishing that objective by going through these methods of boxing.
Do you ever stop and think about how fortunate it was you ran into that guy?
Listen, till this day, I really don't understand that. So how did this happen?
Because so many people...
listen, by the time I was born, he was 66 years old by the time I was born.
Yeah. It's safe to say that Mike Tyson's life forever changed when he met Cus. A man who revolutionized boxing philosophy with simplistic but audacious punctuality. The man has been historically famous for raising boxers. Think the old grandpa in anime that knows 8 different jutsu, and so you have to be nice to him in order to become the next Hokage. Yeah, Cus was Jiraiya and Mike was very much Naruto at like 12 years old. Note that throughout the time we've discussed Mike Tyson, in his infancy, he was Baka 8 to 11. He met Cus when he was 12 years old. So after being arrested almost 40 times, and then finally finding a ray of real boxing hope with Cuss, he was adamant on not throwing away his shot on some Hamilton. Well, I'm still keeping that in the video. I think that's funny.
That's why once I got involved with Cuss, I was a young boy, but once he spoke with me every night about discipline and character, I knew nobody was nobody physically would ever fuck with me again.
Mike would have to prove to the guards time and time again he can be a good boxer by being on his best behavior. But having ended up good enough for the prison to outsource your training must have been like hitting the lottery, especially when you find out how rich the man was. Compared to Mike Tyson's environment in Brownsville, it was night and day. Cuss was a multi-homeowner, boxing genius, who trained the last current youngest heavyweight champion, Floyd Patterson, and a light heavyweight champion, Jose Torres. After a couple more sparring sessions, the lighthouse of Mike's potential propelled Cuss to also share the same worry as Stewart, the same worry of prison and a relapse into the cycle. He then decided to house Mike Tyson, becoming his legal guardian. Mike was all for it. His arrests were pushing 40, and it was at this point that we learned of his mother's cancer diagnosis. She wasn't ever leaving the house or trying for Mike Tyson as hard. She physically wasn't able to.
Or did Cuss ever become your legal guardian?
Yes, he did. When I was maybe 16 or 17, when I was old enough, because my mother had died, and he had to get my mother's signature before she died, and she did. And my mother just couldn't understand why I wanted to stay with these white people. She thought that she wasn't good enough. She was really hurt by that.
Mike also reveals, I don't know much about my father's family. In fact, I didn't really know my father much at all. His only real parental figure was a man named Chitz, who was a pimp that drove the kids around every once in a while. Scraping for that spark of success he was promised on the onset of boxing, he moved in with Cuss. But Cuss's boxing methods were uncanny. He had more than just Sports Illustrated in his library. Nietzsche, Plato, the art of war, anything worldly related to the philosophy of thought was on his shelf. His $1 million house that held boxers wasn't just for show. He ran a factory, and he was a brutal CEO. His expectations for his boxers was pure dedication. Everything and anything done in the house would be for an edge in boxing. At 4 a.m., Mike would be awake doing sprints. 4:30, he was on a 3 to 4 mile run. 5:30 was a shower and sleep. By 12 p.m., you're back in the gym doing work, sparring for almost 10 rounds by 2 p.m. You get an hour break, but then there's another hour-long fighting session, followed by an hour of treadmill running. By this time, it'd be 5 p.m., which means calisthenics work. 2,000 squats, 2,500 sit-ups, 500 to 800 dips, 500 push-ups, 500 shrugs with 30-kilogram barbells, 10 minutes of neck work. On top of that, during this training, Cuss would hammer into Mike Tyson his ideal narrative of a fighter. As Tyson recalls in his autobiography, Undisputed Truth, Cuss once told him out of the blue, "Man, I wish you had a body like Mike Weaver or Ken Norton, because then you'd be real intimidating. You'd have an ominous aura. They don't make the temperament. They don't have the temperament, but they have the physique of an intimidating man. You could paralyze the other boxers with just fear, just by the way you look." Tyson responded, "Don't worry, Cuss. You watch. One day the world is going to be afraid of me. When they mention my name, they'll sweat blood, Cuss." Cuss's boxing philosophy banked heavily on utilizing speed and leverage in order to deal maximum damage. It was called the peekaboo style. Maybe you've seen Hajime no Ippo. Well, it's kind of based off of Cuss and Mike Tyson's relationship. The problem is, however, Mike would have to follow these combinations to a T. This was as much a mental game as and convincing himself that he could really win. Cuss would go to extremes, sending him to hypnotherapy. He didn't care about explosive knockouts. He'd have Mike Tyson repeat the same punch over and over until he knocked someone out the right way. Cuss would also watch Mike Tyson's body and soul like a hawk. After all, in his Italian words, it's how you put the in the seeds. So at first, Mike Tyson was boxing in illegal tournaments. Then, when he reached the legal age, in his first professional bout, he clocked his first knockout versus Hector. Then going on to win the next 26 out of 28 fights by KO, becoming the youngest heavyweight champion at 20. Then unifying the league in his early 20s. That is, getting every other championship belt in his weight division by the time he was 22. His mother would soon pass of cancer, and Cuss would die. Mike would be able to buy houses, live as a staple of black culture, all the pigeons he wanted, and ended up with a family. After a couple controversial divorces, that is. The performance of blackness in a correct sense has always just been a you can never do enough. You can never be enough. Yeah. You can never be cool enough. You can never be like masculine enough. You can never be enough. Because even the hyper masculine characters, that projection of masculinity is going to be used against them. Whereas like a Jake Paul, can hop into sports, market a Mike Tyson who's been this, violent figure of masculinity, at least in a public mythos, and then, denigrate him just all for his own public image, right? Would you say the peer-to-peer masculine gaze was a difficult part of existing and potentially transforming into something you would see yourself as separate from a tag of masculinity or, performance?
To clarify, when you say peer, you mean like how other men perceived me masculine, or? Yeah, we're social beings. And to say that I don't care about what other people think of me would probably be disingenuous and unproductive. I mean, I do. I make videos on the internet, and in no way, shape, or form it's not lost on me that it's because I had a desire. I had something to say, one, and then I also, in two, have a desire to live beyond my corporeal form. I don't like the fact that when I die, that's it. I want something, a legacy, to be remembered by. And I think that as it pertains to how other people impact my masculinity is specific when it comes to other men. In the Bahamas, the Caribbean masculine stereotype is this brutish man that is very much reliant on misogyny. Very much in our everyday interaction, or at least my everyday interaction with men, I was able to pinpoint how pretty much every conversation, every attempt to bond with other men is predicated and bolstered by hating women. Just absolutely talking about women, whether it be in a way of dominance, in a way of conquering, or in a way of debasement, and in a way of maligning. It's interesting, like even like when we're talking about like dissing another man, we're normally dissing another man by denigrating the woman that he's most in proximity to. So it's always like, man, you ain't got no hoes. Like you don't possess, you don't have property of women. Or man, your hoe ugly, man, my hoe bad. Like it's like you are marked by you're marked by them. By the woman that is in proximity to you, much like people will denigrate you if you don't live in a nice house or if you don't live in drive a nice car. In order to bond, as well as in order to diss men, it is predicated on women, especially on hating women, because or just like maligning women, because even if you're like saying that, damn, this man must be a great man because he has a great woman, you're still subjecting the woman, you're still objectifying the woman, and to denigrate the man and say that, oh, your girl ain't bad, like your girl a 4, like you're still denigrating the woman in order to denigrate the man, and it brings you to the realization that what is man but hating women? Like, what is the existence of manhood and masculinity as we understand it in a cishet binary, other than hating women? Like what hobbies do we have? Music do we listen to? Things do we do that isn't somehow based on subjugating women, oppressing women, or hating women just in general? And that took like a long time for me to really grapple with in looking at my own existence. And it required me to really do an autopsy on my relationships with other men and find ways in which I engage with them and really understand if we are truly engaging or we're simply just bashing women. And I got to the conclusion essentially that if I really want to liberate myself as well as my oppressors, I very much need to make a concerted effort to exist in a way that contradicts all of that. And that's a very uncomfortable way of living. I could either choose solidarity, human solidarity, true solidarity with men, or alienation with men. And I think until I achieve an understanding of how best to really address outside of these videos, but just in praxis, I'm often alienated because I'm deemed not safe. It's almost like when white men or when white people are shown to be in allyship with black men or black people, they're deemed not safe. They're deemed traitorous. You know, they're deemed as people that, you know, you have went against and betrayed the white supremacist form, and therefore there's particular social sanctions that we have to levy towards you. The same as for me. If I have a overt feminist politique, then I am not safe to some men, even though I look like this. So as soon as I open my mouth, I know that there's a risk in doing that. And I have a luxury because I exist the way I exist. And I mean, like, nobody can throw hands at me because, like, I'm, you know, pandering to women or you know, trying to speak out against misogyny. But there's little ways in which, like, social sanctions are levied. You know, you're not invited to particular things. They don't call you on the one man, or, I mean, on the 2-man mission.
That's the word.
Yeah.
Missing out on the 2-man.
I'm missing on the 2-man, bro. Like, I'm missing out on me standing up in the club, holding up the wall and watching everybody else have a good time.
No more bubbling.
No more 8 men. 2 bottles of Hennessy and no women. Yep, no more. I've lost that luxury. But I mean, like, it is what it is. This is as a pathway. Sometimes can be like a lonely path.
So let's do some recap here. Tony Hawk was able to capture the spectacle by 1, being the most prominent face, and 2, having the advantage of LA's skateboarding boom. And although the boom of the 1970s to 2000s was created partially through infrastructure designed for white children, and then a cataclysmic drought just allowing for the sport to kind of take off, at the end of the day, he still benefited from the Baka boom, okay? And last but not least, his third step was taking advantage of a new form of media, being introduced into a public setting, combining the boom of video games, television, and fashion, covering multiple avenues not restricted to physical third spaces. Kids around the world didn't need a skateboard in order to know what a skateboarder was. Now, boxing is not skateboarding, but all 3 of these steps worked to the advantage of a Jake Paul. Firstly, being the most prominent face and influencer boxing. Secondly, taking advantage of the new form of digital media, being the internet. And 3, amidst rising interest in companies like the MMA in youth. Jake Paul's window of opportunity for the Tony Hawk method couldn't be any more solidified than in 2024. Perceptually, however, in order to become a real boxer, he had to eat the influence of Mike Tyson and many others. Oh God, guys, we're diving into Jake Paul. This is these are Caucasian waters, I'm telling you. These are Doge employee waters, I'm telling you. These are, I bought Meta property beside Snoop Dogg and Ice Cube because I thought the value would appreciate type territory right now. We're going into some weird territory. From the years of 2013 to 2017, Jake Paul was first a Viner.
Oh, what is this? Hi.
Embodying the image of a boxer couldn't be further from the truth of this niche micro-internet celebrity.
My daughter's new boyfriend is like so nice. He was fixing her window at 2 a.m. so we didn't have to. I know, he's a keeper.
This Jake Paul is more like a piece of the internet we've long since forgotten.
Why did the blonde put the iPhone in the blender? To make apple juice. I don't get it.
However, if you notice, paired beside him at the time was Logan Paul,
Human hurdle!
his brother, who would also come to define a portion of his digital.
Hey, Logan!
Hey,
Jake. Hey, Logan!
Hey, what?
I need you.
Need me?
I need you. Okay. Yes, yes. All right. Bye, Logan. Bye, Jake.
Context to competition.
The higher you climb, the windier it gets. In families, older brother, younger brother, roughly 1 to 2 years apart, maybe 3 years apart, have the toughest relationship with one another. And ours just happens to have a bunch of people watching us go through ebbs and waves.
However, right now we're on the funny stuff. Now, I can't emphasize enough the cultural shift that Vine created in a textual sense. Whereas the majority of online interaction was felt in chat rooms and Facebook pages, Vine changed the method of relation to content creation. I mean, the way people come into contact with new information at breakneck speed is directly because of the 7-second algorithm we've become accustomed to. The internet has proven a useful tool in terms of social interaction. Reels and shorts were even created in order to mimic this innovative form of spectacle. Vine changed the strings attached to content creation. Even though Instagram was mostly a place for photos and visual aesthetics to go viral, Vine was the first app to place an emphasis on giving you loads of quick, digestible, and easy to swallow type content. Behind the scenes in its music and dances, superstars like Young Thug, the Migos, Lil Jon, Lil Yachty, and Fanatics, the Tantara guy, the Don't Drop That Tantara guy. I know everyone that it's 20, I know y'all remember that Tantara song. Don't act like you forgot. I remember everyone shaking would see their songs being used for trends, and thus even the circulation of music through the algorithm influenced the future of artists then onward. However, the real benefactors were the central figures of retention. Niche micro-internet celebrities from across the globe were able to come in contact with a vast array of peer-to-peer subjectivities. I mean, like, you're on this channel and we just hit 100K. You understand this. So compared to Tony Hawk's era of digital retention, found in news channels, shows, movies, and video games, Jake Paul had a huge advantage in terms of outreach. Where Tony Hawk was found at a skate park, Jake Paul was found by millions of eyes online. He didn't have to go to boxing competitions, skating tournaments, skate-ins, things like that. His spectacle is not solidified by the sport. It's solidified by his outlandish actions outside of it. Essentially, he didn't have to play the sport to be famous. Instead, he was now in an era where trends were like IV bags to influencers, and he was free to load up on whatever sustenance of fluid packets he could, just sucking them all up, sucking them. Jake Paul would prove a central figure in a collection of new age stars which emerged out of the app. However, this man started off in a medium of comedy. This movement of artists lasted from about 2013 to 2017. Jake Paul would join it in 2013 at 16 years old. Still a high school attendee. I'm gonna call this art movement the Viner movement. If you don't know what an art movement is, it's when a large number of artists that are alive at the same time collectively adopt a certain uniquely distinguishable form or style of art that can be held apart from contemporary styles and methods. This 7-second algorithm creating a whole new way of comedic content creation spawned all these artists. And this art movement of Viners would later go to clash with another rising art movement, YouTube commentary. But about like the name Viner movement, yeah, we gotta workshop that. I was thinking like short-term retention unks, but that doesn't really like roll off the tongue. Give me some better ideas, please. Please. The Viner movement was spearheaded by figures like King Bach, who used the public appeal of racism in order to rake up views. Amanda Cerny, being essentially made the role of fan service and skits, playing into the public spectacle of the male gaze. Minor lover Cody Ko, Gabriel Gundacker, Nick Coletti, Jake Paul, Logan Paul, David Dobrik, Lele Pons. Jake Paul used conjectures of each of these Viners' appeal and incorporated it into his content. Along the line, he learned, hey, King Bach was good for racist jokes. People like Lele Pons were amazing for slapstick humor. Amanda Cerny had A-tier gooner talent. You could say Jake Paul had like his humor, his very unique brand of humor. Vine in itself, however, was a platform of creativity, open to the public eye. So yes, we still had amazing artists like Quen Blackwell. Please let me on your show, Quen Blackwell, please. But as Vine progressed and followers accreated with each respective Viner, certain content creators accruing hundreds of thousands of followers saw collaboration through the space of Vine as a means of expanding and increasing viewership naturally. The human supercut himself, Jake Paul, born January 17th in 1997 in Westlake, Ohio, would follow this movement of artists. See, in Ohio, Jake was consistently following in the footsteps of his brother. He was a wrestler and a landscaper. He and his brother were interested in the same activity, mutually interested in the same proclivities of life. The proclivities like boxing, grabbing men on the floor, and moaning. That's what they both did. They really were passionate about that. But Logan Paul was always bigger and stronger and better than Jake Paul at whatever he did. This was also the case with Vine. Although the two brothers started making videos as children after their father gave them a video camera 1 year after Christmas, Logan Paul's Vines were a bit more mature. A bit. Don't stretch it out. Don't make it like this. It's a bit. You could see the dynamic of an older/younger brother take place in context to their performances of character. In these 6-second skits, most Viners would take on certain vestiges of character. Jake Paul was an over-exaggerated 18-year-old. Everything he was, if we're being honest. I don't expect him to be any more or any less. I mean, the dude used to make videos with his old crew of friends from Ohio, then switch them out for people like Amanda Cerny, Lele Pons, Liza Koshy, Ethan and Grayson Dolan in a very deliberate move. But that's also something I don't hold too highly against him. We're gonna get to the evil stuff soon. However, this move to LA would give Jake Paul the level of A-list influencer. You could tell Vine was always kind of just a stepping stool. And as the hate for the character he played in the 7-second algorithm festered, agitating a population which hated on him for gravitating towards gooner adjacent content. That's probably the best I could name this. But it wasn't just Vine. Jake Paul's influence would also permeate apps such as Facebook and YouTube to the point where a lot of these influencers in LA were starting to rival his followers by comparison. By the time Vine had been deleted from the App Store, Logan Paul accrued 13.1 million Facebook fans and 7 million on Instagram. Jake would always look at his brother though, and following in his footsteps, he would also try to branch out to multiple platforms, posting YouTube vlogs at a time where creatives like Casey Neistat, Rice Gum, members of FaZe, KSI, The Sidemen, Emma Chamberlain, everybody and anybody was participating in this vlogging trend, heavily inspired by the humor of Vine, featuring most of the same stars. I mean, they were all in LA, it was kind of inevitable. However, the Vine journey would soon come to an end, with Jake Paul garnishing 5.3 million followers with its deletion. Although he was still the smaller, more annoying Paul, Logan Paul was almost double his size at a whopping 9.4 million on Vine. But we have to realize he was still the smaller, more annoying Paul. Logan Paul was almost double his size at a whopping 9.4 million. He had to transgress where no Viner has gone before, mainstream YouTube. And after 25 days of vlogging, hanging from clips, and multiple pranks, he also garnished a stable YouTube platform. Although the ethos of YouTube commentary at the time was heavily dependent on just on Vine stars, KSI and Deji, another sibling relationship on YouTube, would be some of the most vocal figures against the Pauls. Although everyone was kind of hating on Jake Paul and Logan Paul at the time, it was just cool to hate on them, like Rice Gum, Philip DeFranco, Drama Alert, it was popular at the time, H3, who was also popular at the time, PewDiePie, who was also popular. It was some weird people hating on some weird people with time. However, Jake had an acting license and he was still getting retention with a platform full of kids. This landed him Disney opportunities and deals like an exclusive series with YouTube Red. YouTube Red was basically the subscription servers where very popping YouTubers would hop on and get their own series. People like Logan Paul and King Bach got them too. He also wrote a really bad book, published it, and a glazed track for Rice Gum. Not a diss track.
Why would anybody stop beef with Rice Gum? He'll cook you up.
A glazed track.
You're dumb.
However, his search for clout would now become national news, pushing the boundaries of acceptable content by kissing the same 20-year-old girl his dad did at 50.
We have 3 fine contestants here, all Ohio, born and raised.
Launching fireworks almost daily in his new neighborhood and becoming a hotbed for SWAT teams and eager fans, all for a bigger and bigger spectacle. He loved it.
Jake Paul's attorney says he was out of state and not at his Calabasas home during that raid today. The FBI says they're investigating allegations of criminal acts for an incident that happened back in May at a Scottsdale mall.
Neighbor from hell? Disney Channel star Jake Paul is accused of making life miserable for his neighbors in fancy West Hollywood.
We've done a lot of dumb things. This is the dumbest thing we've ever done.
Here, he burns furniture in his
The move from Ohio to LA would see Jake Paul find what he was looking for, creating opportunities for Disney, YouTube, brand deals, and getting millions and millions of more followers. And I can't stress how weird Jake Paul got in this creative endeavor of YouTube he partook in.
Monday, we gotta kill it today. I'm trying to inspire the kids. You're not being a good role model.
There's literally dozens of kissing euphemism thumbnails or literal screenshots of his girlfriend's booty. He got creative in this ethos of YouTube clickbait, if we're being generous, I guess. Jake Paul was itching for them clicks. He wasn't being demure about it too. He wasn't being demure. I didn't have time to go through them all, but this is a lot. This is a lot. Now this is where it gets awful and putrid. Well, in LA, Jake Paul had this grandiose idea to buy a multi-million-dollar house around the idea of 10 content creators.
Now I feel like Los Angeles is my home. I think it's because I had like a place to park. I park, open the door, and walk right in. I love my truck, so gotta have a nice home for it.
However, Jake Paul, being the humorist he is, carried on his same degradations of content.
Wait, is there tongue in this?
Yeah.
It's like a real kiss, right?
Oh my God! What? Oh my God! That's a guy! Oh my God!
The Martinez twins were treated racially. Their visas at times were revoked by Jake Paul.
You wanna go back to Spain? You wanna go back to Spain?
Oh, is this Spain? No, shut the f up. I'm talking in English and they like don't know exactly what I'm saying, but they don't understand what I'm saying. Oh yeah, well you're ugly and no one likes you and they're never gonna subscribe to your channel ever and go die. Bro, you can hate all you want, but if you guys didn't have blue eyes and nice hair, you would have 0 followers.
This man would milk Tessa, 1 out of the 10 content creators. News reports and drama videos were coming out about his shenanigans daily. But it wasn't until real allegations came out.
They didn't even love us. We used to love them. So imagine you, little kid from Spain or from another part of this world. Did you go to LA? You don't even talk English.
Brings more girls over, and then he would be with me, and then he would have a girl over, and then 2 days later he'd be with me, and then we'd be together, and then we'd not be together, and then we'd fight.
Rice Gum, a YouTuber Jake Paul glazed only a year ago, would hop in and join the feud.
I can tell that you came with a Disney flow. Hey, ain't nobody ever heard about your Disney show.
After sleeping with girls in front of Alyssa Violet, making a diss track about her, and allegedly assaulting a number of femme influencers in the house that everyone slept in, he then doubled down by abusing them with his platform. See, the once goofy kid on Vine turned YouTuber couldn't work this heel angle anymore. There were now serious allegations levied against him for the sole reason of not having a lawyer on speed dial and $90 million to offer to OJ Mayo type defense team. I said allegations, okay? I said allegations. But if you want some funny piece of news, Jake Paul totally got like cucked when I was like 8 years watching old. This. Like Jake Paul's brother like kisses his ex-girlfriend like on stream for some type of diss track, bro, in HD 4K. It's still up there. I know he still stays up at night sad about that. So reacting to all this, Jake Paul came back kind of unconventionally, dissed himself.
Let me tell y'all about this fuck Jake Paul. Fake wife, fake life, no talent at all.
It was awful, but his audience loved it. Jake Paul also apologized for a bit of what he did to Alyssa Violet, but the apology was kind of just mostly a vlog, so I don't know. The question the sincerity. This trend of apology videos and mass scrutiny would continue, with Logan Paul being one of his biggest critics. But long story short, the brothers became friends again. Then Logan Paul went to Suicide Forest, which triggered one of the biggest YouTube advertisement reactions of all time, the Adpocalypse, where he filmed a dead body hanging from a tree. I mean, he apologized.
I made a severe and continuous lapse in my judgment.
But it wasn't ever really enough, and the scrutiny the two brothers would garnish followed them from this point onwards. Luckily, however, there was someone to bail them out. Seeing an opportunity to be the face of the spectacle, the internet's biggest minstrel, who at this time had around 20 million subscribers.
Pretty much, we're exactly the same as everyone else, except we can say the word n***.
Anyone can say the word n***.
Imagine the hero that knocked out the YouTube villain of the century, KSI. He called out Jake and Logan Paul after this fight.
Jake Paul, Logan Paul, any of the Pauls, I don't care. Bring it. Same, yo, if any celebrity wants it.
The man he beat, Joe Weller, technically created influencer boxing. See, influencer boxing was more so seen as YouTube boxing at this time in the trend phase, as YouTubers were doing the fight. It all started back in August 1st, 2017, when UK YouTubers Joe Weller and Theo Baker uploaded a fight between the two of them onto Joe's YouTube channel.
What's going on, everyone? It's the True Geordie back again, and today some YouTube drama is finally going to get settled the old-fashioned.
There was no bad blood between the two of them. Quote, they're good friends, and it was purely made for entertainment purposes. However, during a promotion on Instagram for the bout between the two, popular YouTuber KSI, at 20 million subscribers, made a comment to let him fight the winner. It wasn't a surprise when Joe, the favorite for the fight, beat Theo.
It counts, winner.
Joe. And this is where the large-scale boxing events began to blossom. Joe Weller and KSI announced and confirmed the fight in September 2017, well after a little scuffle on stage at a YouTube event.
Yeah, friends!
Just because you got no friends, mate. Shut up.
All right, lads. KSI and Joe Weller found themselves in England newspapers after exchanging insults on social media, press conferences, and a final weigh-in.
Let's do the
Yeah, tell that to the two girls I had sex with, bro. Come on, bro.
Unstable, all right?
Bro.
Yeah, I'll say that.
Oh, do you need drugs?
Drugs?
Do you need drugs?
No.
Stay sane, bro?
What, antidepressants?
Yeah.
What, you taking a piss out of depression?
I'm not taking the piss.
Well, that's exactly what you're doing.
I'm not taking the piss.
You taking a piss out of depression? That's exactly what you're doing.
Are you getting
How
depressed?
dare you, bro?
What you want to do then?
How dare
what
you
wanna
take the
do,
piss
bro?
out of mental health?
They fought in the Copper Box Arena, London, on the 3rd of February 2018.
Imagine 8,000 people seeing your head absolutely crushed onto the canvas.
Several undercard fighters were held on the same night, all leading up to the final bout, all influencers. There wasn't a digital site out there that didn't report on this. KSI mollywopped Joe the whole fight. Mollywopped him. Bop, bop, bop. Around 20 million people watched it. It was the talk of the town. The live stream alone generated millions on YouTube. And then it happened. In a post-fight interview, KSI called out the Paul brothers.
I'm ready, yo. 4 months, bro. 4 months training, that's all I had.
Logan Paul and Jake Paul, however, would first be weird and try to send their dad after KSI.
I asked Dad to send me a video saying what he thinks about the whole KFC situation.
Oh, Logie, what's going on? Hey, if he wants to fight me, I'm totally on board. I'll whip his ass. They have another brother. I'm fine to have another son.
Yeah, make him your son.
Make him your son.
You. Make him your son. Sign you. And we paying you $50K. You won't.
But after receiving mass scrutiny from the internet, Logan Paul decided to release a video called Am I Boxing KSI, where he set his terms and conditions, one of them being a deji fight against Jake Paul.
Boy, like, I want to fight in the US. Vote headgear, no headgear. If it's a rules and regulations thing and like we have to do it, like, okay, fine. But I want to do everything in my power to avoid Another one, guys, weight classes, right? I'm 210 pounds. JJ's like 182. I am heavier than him. So KSI, bro, we got to meet somewhere in the middle. Lastly, I want my brother, Jake Paul, to fight KSI's little brother, Deji?
For 3 months, the YouTubers Deji and KSI would see themselves beefing against Jake and Logan Paul.
I'm so serious.
The fight was promoted as the biggest internet event in history.
I put an octagon in my living room. Dude, if you're not gonna fight me right now, then stop calling me the P word. Deal or no deal?
Jake Paul is a...
And this is where the spectacle of relation comes in. Jake Paul and Logan Paul were in a narrative of YouTube now. They literally demonetized the platform for hundreds of other creators.
I can feel that body with no remorse.
Now, if you don't know the full details of the story as we covered it in the Wednesday show, I highly recommend you watch it.
Okay. Fellow creators to call out.
Today I'm going to be talking about Logan
Yes.
Paul. Normally I would
a lot of crazy stuff has gone down in the last week or so on YouTube in regards to the whole Logan Paul situation.
They were villains to everybody, but they still had their own strong platforms. People still tuned in to see what bad or what apology or what they do next. Likewise, the spectacle followed them from drama to the boxing. In the same way, KSI, one of the most popular YouTubers of all time, at 10 million followers, and Jake Paul at 12 million at the time, and Logan Paul at 15 million. This is almost 100 million subscribers between all of these players. And there were still more cards in the fight. The fight was promoted as the biggest internet event in history, in front of a global audience of millions. KSI would see himself coming to a draw with Logan Paul, while Jake beat Deji. It sold 1.3 million pay-per-view buys. The combined purse was estimated to be about 150 million pounds. That's almost $200 million. Seeing the attention they garnished, seeing the buzz created afterwards, seeing the audience feast at the spectacle, they decided to strike a rematch. For the rematch, both fighters agreed to do it the right way, which means under professional terms. The headgear they were wearing the last fight had to be taken off. Both fighters wearing 10-ounce gloves and being subjected to the same drug testing and medical screening by the California State Athletic Commission. The press conference became a spectacle.
The American education system.
Jake Paul! She said Jake Paul!
Y'all say anything else?
Okay. Yo, I'm here with Rice Scott.
Why are you wearing high heels? There's 0% chance that Deji wins this.
So you're gonna make not one, but 2 dumbass children. What the fuck is wrong with your sperm?
Hey, if you want to ask about the 2 dumb
shut the
children,
fuck up.
ask your mom. Ask your mom about the 2 dumb children.
DAZN, the all-sports streaming app, which has just spent hundreds of millions to disrupt the boxing market by signing big stars and announcing it as killed pay-per-view, believes broadcasting the fight will be a big boon to subscription, and they were right. This time, the bout was featured by future superstar, 20-year-old champion Devin Haney. Twitter posts got millions of likes, YouTube videos got millions of views.
Audition for Baywatch. Fuck you, Logan! Get the part!
Instagram videos had millions of views.
And still not end up in the final movie. Fuck
Instagram had millions.
My song ended up in the final movie.
Facebook was popular.
Where were you? Oh yeah. Deleted scenes.
Anything and everything on their platform started marketing this fight. However, Jake Paul at this point, even though he won, was still an undercard. He was still in the backseat. People didn't love him more after this fight. They just hated Deji. KSI was set up to rematch Logan Paul, while Jake Paul was set to fight Deji. Stepping over his controversy, stepping over his drama, Logan Paul starts to reconstruct himself as just somebody who had to play the character. There's definitely a perception of Logan Paul. When you hear the name and aren't subscribed to any of my content, I definitely play the villain online, except in this fight. I think it's safe to say KSI is also a villain. This is not a villain hero stories. This is 2 characters who are larger than life, with egos growing out of their body, and it's going to be a day of reckoning. The bout still went on. Held on November 9th, 2019 at Staples Centers in Los Angeles, California, where Logan Paul lost in a split decision. And after Deji lost to Jake Paul for a second time in a row, Jake Paul called out Chris Brown. The allure of boxing is very much competitive in its nature. It's test of strength, it's testimony to physical endurance. And above all, Mike Tyson historically has been the epitome of this practice. Jake Paul, not so much, but in his state of rebrand, he became one. Mike Tyson is convenient. After all, the spectacle of a boxer is contained in their accolades, specifically being knockouts. The fights in which Mike Tyson dominated ever more so deepen these images, while Jake Paul's fights kind of just bore Mike Tyson presented to a public. He earned the name Iron Mike Tyson. However, with as much wins as he tallied, boxing is a sport which is a welcoming test of strength for all. Remember, embodying this personification had different connotation for boxers across eras. Spectacles are linked solely by their one-way relationship to the very center that keeps them isolated from each other. And every time Jake Paul has had the opportunity to garnish attention, whether it be videos on Vine, pranks on YouTube, drama with women, he's turned the spectacle into himself. Following the art movement of Viners, he developed a platform by collaborating with Central artists. Following the art movement of 2010 diss track, he tried to hire Gucci Mane, Lil Pump, and blossom his own rap career. Following the movement of influencer boxing, he's trying to take the center ring with the clips of Mike Tyson. From the digital ethos of Vine to the digital streaming service of Dazn to the ring, where our willing combatants meet in order to cross fists. Unless you're like me and you keep Nakama for the 7 C's, you know what I mean. Jake Paul has managed to absorb the basis of reality for influencer boxing and become it, getting a deal with Netflix in a record-breaking night of 65 million concurrent streams. See, the very real reality is Jake Paul won the Deji fight, but in a convoluted manner. See, the spectacles hide the hand with the knife. I become so big you can't ignore it, KSI yells, outlining his master plan to make Misfits boxings the next WWE. The intention is to create our own mini universe that can keep expanding. Midget boxing, overweight boxing, any type of fight on screen, he will monetize from it. One that merges the ferocity of combat sports with the spectacle of WWE. He notes skill levels may vary, but Misfits will not see that as a barrier to build a stable of personalities audience can rally behind. All this to say, since the internet is the new basis of interaction, hotspots of connected communities are profitable commercially, and these men are multimillionaires in a ring. KSI creating his own promotional company with his own belt, building his own world of knockouts and wins interconnected into his own established internet fame was the same route Jake Paul took. Jake Paul, in the same way as KSI, allying with the company of Dazn with his own belt, building his own world of knockouts and wins interconnected in his own established internet fame, creates a confined spectacle where he can't lose monetarily, essentially. In Mike Tyson's era, products would market to TV stations. This new age of streaming and new age of boxing sees rivalries between YouTubers like KSI and Logan Paul, reeling in the youth of today as profitable. Whereas Logan Paul used the canvas of boxing to later segue to WWE, repair his image and become marketable again to his commercial benefit, Jake Paul utilizes the history of boxing and martial arts as a sport present in a public aesthetic. But he was still the undercard after all. KSI was the guy with the promotion company at this point, and the more notably retentive rivalry was still with Logan Paul. But no matter, stepping into the new age of influencer marketing, Jake, I Like Minors Paul, a Vine creator turned YouTuber, turned Disney star, turned boxer / promoter, believed his true passion had been found. Jake Paul has always marketed himself in the public eye successfully, and through having a degraded image of concerning peppered allegations from exes, but still being successful and receiving praise in his fight against Deji, he's realized that this boys will be boys image can be used to his advantage. Although the mythos started with Deji, his first official match was with Al Gibb, a pretty big YouTuber. He tallied a first round knockout, then against Nate Robinson, tallying another knockout. At this point in time, his contextual history waned away from YouTube and his brother. He was not the undercard anymore. He was the main event, and he was still being his outlandish self on social media, garnishing a series of KOs over notable figures in the world of sports, like Ben Askren, Tyron Woodley, and Anderson Silva, while sending shots each and every time at Dana White, flaunting his match purses and scrutinizing Dana White for his payment of athletes. Even though the UFC kind of uses an entirely different model, it didn't matter. Jake Paul presents the image of a capable athlete and owner through constant retention and monetary value to the eyes of a public that just wants blood. His defeat of Anderson Silva, Dana White's Mike Tyson essentially, an athlete inducted into the MMA Hall of Fame for changing combat sports, was a blow not for just sports, not for just combat sports, but a personal attack on Dana White. Imagine being beat by a dude who just got his fade from Great Clips. On top of that, he's knocked down notable figures like Ben Askren, a former Olympic boxer, not once but twice. But you see, Jake Paul has one loss. A heavyweight champion's sibling won by decision against this guy, but that didn't stop him. He bounced back with a resounding victory against Nate Diaz, another one of Dana White's boxers. He then set his sights on world champion, beating Andre and Ryan, two fighters with actual experience. Although they didn't have any sort of belts or are not in the running for any kind of belts. This was just to solidify his belts that he made. And from this point on, he was world champion essentially to himself. Finally, 5 years after his many allegations, hate, and scrutiny as an influencer, he was up against Mike Tyson with the biggest purse on the line. Each of these wins were methodically concocted in order to situate himself as a great man in the world of boxing, designed to expand his promoting company, sell more tickets, and accrue more credit to the icon of Jake Paul. As the CEO of MVP Promotions, his KO and win record mean everything. Logan Paul, after the KSI fight, went and fought Floyd Mayweather, but it was for a purse under Mayweather Promotions. Unique to Jake Paul is his conversation of ownership over former athletes. Anderson Silva has since suffered a feasible injury and has never been the same fighter. Was this fair? Ben Askren qualifies for senior benefits at Costco. Is this fair? Nate Robinson, well, look at him. Is this fair? These athletes, being once impactful and beneficial to the sports they partake in, are simply pieces of a puzzle Jake Paul is trying to concoct, like Caucasian, but Mike Tyson, this figure of attainability that Jake is chasing after, is the blueprint for Jake Paul's marketed image. I mean, at a certain point, it was almost heresy not to call Mike Tyson the strongest man. In the 2000s, as his knockouts tallied, taking bigger and bigger shots at opponents, the world would tune in, anticipating, almost sadistically, for another fatal KO. No one has embodied the terror of Mike Tyson. What didn't change, however, was Mike knocking people out and putting the asses in the sea. See, Cuss was the man who found his matches initially, but that transition was made horrendous with the addition of Don King. It was noted together they seemed like an unstoppable team, but behind the scenes, Don King was a con artist with confirmed murders and millions of dollars siphoned from Mike's fights. What he was good at, though, was advertising the image of Mike Tyson. In the pre-internet world, Mike Tyson was everywhere. Magazines, late night talk shows, video games. He even debuted a boxing ring in Tokyo. That's where we get Hajimino Ippo from. The fighter Mike Tyson trained to embody, Don King materialized to the world. I mean, Mike was bringing in political leaders and business executives on top of cultural figures like Donald Trump, Madonna, Denzel Curry, Will Smith. There's literally a 10-minute video with all these faces alone. However, the 80s and 90s spectacle of Mike died, but was later revived here. In 2017, the then UFC lightweight champion Conor McGregor broke with convention when he fought boxing champion Floyd Mayweather Jr. in a crossover fight that was billed the money fight. Mayweather was guaranteed 100 mil and McGregor 30 mil for the fight. That same year, an amateur boxing event in London pitted YouTube influencers against each other with a headline fight between KSI, a 31-year-old British influencer and musician, and Joe Weller, also an influencer and musician. That started a trend with Logan Paul, who made a name for himself by posting prank videos online, facing off against KSI the following year, and then against Mayweather in a 2021 exhibition match, which led Logan Paul to fight Mayweather, and Jake Paul to climb up on his own ladder of victories, combating Dana White. Mike Tyson was also a part of a large movement of 90s boxing, and during that time, there was this man named Roy Jones Jr. Can't be moved, can't be brought, can't be shook. Maybe you've seen that mixtape online. I saw that when I was like 10 years old. That left me in amazement. In the same way, he was an entertaining fighter. However, he never met Mike in the ring. Mike, receiving a call for a purse, decided to fight him in 2020 during the pandemic. Seeing the viewer turnout for Logan's fight, Conor's fight, and a chance to capture a past spectacle, Jake signed the sheet. The real fight wasn't between Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson, though. Don't forget that if you look too long, the kaleidoscope of life looks back. Instead, I think the real fight was this: the views, streams, likes, and acknowledgement that comes with it. Jake is a digital gladiator of sorts. He's a man on the internet that survives off of the lifeblood of engagement, meaning the king of the chessboard regarding physical strength, Mike Tyson, was just another move in his convoluted game of ownership. He is entertaining as Jake Paul clashing with the boxers he fights with throughout Instagram and Twitter is. One thing catches my eye: Dana White, CEO of the UFC. That's a pretty hefty target. See, the UFC is a $21 billion fight organization owned by this Dr. Eggman clone right here. It's been around for 20 years. The first UFC fight was held in 1993 as a pay-per-view event. It was initially intended to see which martial art held the most weight in an arena. Without rules, boxing, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, karate were all allowed. You had sumo wrestlers of Japan versus French kickboxers, breakdancing fighters from Brazil who learned their art in a history of seclusion from European enslavers, fighting men who just chugged 8 packs of beer and decided being the strongest in Louisiana means the world. The UFC was a spectacle never before seen. In 2001, Dana White bought it, however, with Lorenzo and Frank Ferretta for $2 million, forming the Zuffa LLC, which just means company. They added weight classes, gloves, disallowed strikes like eye pokes, and cleaned it up, so to say. Throughout this process, Dana White found himself in the company of NBA, football, hockey, and soccer team owners in the age of television. Notice how in the age of streaming, Dana White sees himself beside boxing promoters Jake Paul attending a Trump inauguration. Social media is now our main relation to the product of sports. Troy Bolton, in a social media sense, materially appeared with the conjuration of platforms. Cristiano Ronaldo, the most followed person in the world, has 580 million followers, a soccer player. In 2021, NBA was the #1 trending Google search in the United States, beating out Squid Game, Mega Millions, and Stimulus Check, among other top searches, and 4th worldwide. Social media is woven into modern day sports culture. In a Mike Tyson of the modern age, you may see them in a form of content on reels or in clips. This is mainly because the digital ethos of reality has submerged us under its control. There's children as young as grade 4 being scouted for basketball opportunities after all. Dually, sports streaming services have also switched mostly online, a lot of them now including college and high school games on top of streamer fights. After Dana White's Ultimate Fighter proved reality TV could hook new fans, the UFC signed a broadcast deal with Fox, all for media rights around this show. The deal was inked at $100 million annually. Then after upgrading in 2019 to ESPN, $300 million annually. The UFC has been turning away from television to favor streaming services by 2023. The UFC has been turning away from television to favor streaming services. By 2023, the UFC was earning $870 million from media rights alone. So it's no wonder how through this whole process, Jake Paul the boxer, signing deals with DAZN, going back and forth with Dana White as far back as 2020 in a series of tweets, Instagram story posts, Snapchat sneak disses, and a YouTube diss track, has observed this shift in objectivity related to media and uses Dana White's UFC fighters to bring attention to his own streams. This match was set up, but is it ever really not? We condition boys to look at athletics as a money ticket, and we expect them not to look at what's shiny.
So now he feels proud. Now he's not begging no more. Now he wants to be himself. He's not worrying you no more. So he needs some black history, and he needs some black culture, so he'll know who he is and be proud to be who he is and quit worrying you so much.
Amidst the turmoil of in-place living conditions in the West, creating a rapidly declining standard of life for these kids, we have to ask ourselves, is this perception of money the root of all evil? Of course, Mike Tyson threw himself at the idea of boxing for fame and money. I remember the first time I picked up a basketball. I played soccer my whole life, and seeing my cousins outside our old neighborhood shooting around had me curious. I was 6 years old. I found out that more than soccer, basketball was a way for me and my cousins to communicate without communicating. The best on the court, and the one we knew had a positive future, was treated like royalty. I joined multiple clubs, played 4 days out of 7, stayed at courts until I made 1,000 shots because I saw it in some kind of Ray Allen montage video. Did push-ups every day like my coach told me. Watched every single Kobe Bryant montage. Created a friend group solely off of the idea of playing more basketball. Other friends who I'd rope into staying at the court for hours at a day with me. On the court was the first time I vented about my familial issues with friends. It's where I guided my biggest accolades. I won a banner with my name on it for the school, for my coach. The man who trusts me scoring the ball 30 minutes a game. I became everything this basketball wanted me to be, or everything I thought this basketball wanted me to become for its acceptance. But then, like Mike Tyson, that spectacle passes. Like the horse races, like the skateboarders, like the roller skaters, like the protests, they pass. And all that's left is me on this court with my basketball. With my life in a free fall after leaving high school and having nothing to ground it anymore, I found a new passion, posting videos on TikTok. They get tens of thousands of likes. I was admired for a different type of skill, for more than just being 6'5" and good at basketball. I was funny, maybe even attractive. A creative genius, they'd say in the comments. I still play basketball. It's like therapy. The same way Mike Tyson throws punches, I think. It just feels natural. I wonder, this community that we built, on the same platform which captures so much interconnected history between athletes, communities, third spaces, and everyday life. Because the fact of the matter is, spectacles die. Mike Tyson's fame wane. Where are we going to be after this? What will become of it? I don't have an answer or sentence to express this emotion I have surrounding the depiction of self to an indifferent world. I'm just another person right now. Balling, I was Theob, the tall skinny dude. Now I'm Turb, the artist. This wasn't projected for me, the basketball was, but we become what we must. To what reason? Community, that is, or at least I think. Community spurred me to play basketball Jake Paul to pick up a camera with his brother, Mike to throw his first punch for his pigeon. I want y'all to think about how the metaphorical mirrored reflection of a retina, how your view of an eye in another person, can contribute to so much characterization. It's optimal. You are the main relation to the spectacle. Judge and watch accordingly. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching this video. I know this video took a while, but there was so much research done for this specific video. I read like 4 different books, threw in 2 different interviews, Foreign and Lil Bill. Thank you again for hopping on and doing all that. So I'm trying to get all my rent, fees, and expenses paid and everything. So if y'all want to help, here's the Ko-Fi right here. You can help here. Ko-Fi at Turb. Thank you. Thank you so much. Like, I really appreciate y'all so much. Like, it's so wild because this came in like probably around 2 weeks before like we started like recording. Like, I did a YouTube post, but I didn't want to do, you know what I mean? I wanted to make a really big grandiose YouTube video, so I pulled out one of my passion projects to just start working on it. Turned out like this. Was one of my favorite videos I've ever made. So like, yeah, thank y'all so much for being here. Thank y'all for keeping this dream alive, this Baka channel. Like I said, I really this is really community, you know what I'm saying? Like, this means a lot to me. So I'm happy that y'all, you know, listen to me, like do all this stuff on the internet, because I don't know what I'd be doing if I wasn't doing this. You know what I'm saying? So this means a lot. Like, this is a staple. This means a lot. Thank y'all. Till next time, I'll see y'all. Peace.